Now, what the United States wants to do, and we're actually passing legislation to authorize this, probably already authorized, but just to make it clear, is to seize the assets. And we've already frozen them. We've frozen them, meaning Russia can't sell them, can't collect the interest, can't transfer them, but they still belong to Russia. That's what freezing is. Now, what the government wants to do is seize them, confiscate them, basically, take them from Russia, steal them, in effect, and then use that money to rebuild Ukraine. Now, there are a number of problems with that. Number one, you're not going to be able to rebuild Ukraine because Russia will take over the whole country at the rate they're going. So there'll be nothing. Russia might want to rebuild it. The Ukrainians might, but the West is not going to rebuild Ukraine because the West is not going to be involved. That's how badly they're losing. But that aside, when you do that, that's a default on U.S. Treasury securities.
In this thought-provoking analysis by Jim Rickards, a renowned financial expert, he delves into the intricacies of the current geopolitical landscape, focusing on Russia's strategic approach to the conflict in Ukraine. Rickards provides compelling data-driven insights, emphasizing Russia's slow yet effective method of warfare, leading to their decisive advantage. The discussion pivots to the financial sanctions imposed on Russia, with Rickards unveiling the limited impact they've had and the potential repercussions for the US economy. Notably, he warns against the proposed move to seize $300 billion of Russian assets, arguing that such a drastic measure may not only fail to rebuild Ukraine, but could also instigate a global shift away from the US dollar. Rickards concludes with a stark assessment of the broader consequences, urging viewers to stay informed about the evolving financial dynamics. To stay abreast of crucial updates, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Now let's dive into the video.
The bottom line is that Russia is winning decisively. People don't understand the Russian way of war. They're never in a hurry. They're very slow, methodical, thorough. They put up a great entrenched defense, and then they fight a war of attrition. They basically annihilate the enemy without ever attacking because the enemy attacks them. They invented what they call crumple zones. They'll make a sort of advance, but not in great strength, and then the enemy counterattacks and they retreat. And then the enemy moves forward, but what they don't realize is they're going into a kill zone, and then they get a massive artillery, drone, and bomber bombardment and get annihilated with very high casualties. I think there were 500,000 dead Ukrainians since the war started. It's a war that never should have happened. It was really a failure of U.S. diplomacy, among other things, but a war that never should have happened. But now that it's far along, it'll be 2 years old next month. Just to be clear, Russia's winning. Ukraine's losing badly. They're running out of men. U.S. aid has dried up. That's tangled up in the Congress. They can't get Ukraine aid passed through the House and Senate. The Europeans have stopped giving more money. Hungary has a veto. They might get a little bit in dribbles over a 5-year period, but not anywhere near what they need. You see Zelensky running around Davos with a tin cup, trying to get money, and comes back empty-handed. The economy is a shambles. A lot of the money we give them just goes to pay, government salaries to the oligarchs and the neo-Nazis. So, there's this idea we're fighting for democracy in Ukraine, which is nonsense. The U.S. is having elections this year. Russia is having elections. Ukraine canceled their elections and arrested their political enemies. So, show me where the democracy is. That obviously doesn't exist. So, but on the financial side, which I think our viewers might be most interested in, the financial sanctions have been a complete failure. About to get worse, by the way. I'll spend a minute on that. But I teach financial warfare at a seminar on financial warfare at the U.S. Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And when I did it 2 years ago in April 2022, right after the war started, I went through the sanctions. It's a small class, about 12, 13, all handpicked mid-career officers, lieutenant colonels, Navy commanders, some civilians, CIA, State Department, and a few others. But it's an elite group. They've been kind of handpicked as the future big brains. I always ask how the old classes are doing, future 3-star generals or deputy national security advisors, et cetera. And the class was very gung-ho. It was right after the war began. I said, just so you know, the sanctions are going to fail. and they'll actually be worse than a failure. They'll boomerang and hurt the United States more than they hurt Russia. Russia will not. It will not change Russia's behavior. In that sense, they'll fail in terms of their immediate objective, but actually the Russian economy will be fine. In the 2023 class, I said, here's what I told last year's class, and I was right about everything. The sanctions had failed. They had hurt the United States. The Russian economy was fine. All the oil or natural gas that Western Europe didn't want, they sold it to India and China. The Russian ruble was steady. It's gone down a little bit, but not much. But the idea that Biden, we're going to destroy the ruble, we're going to crush Russia, not true. I mean, he actually doesn't know what he's talking about. The Russian economy is outperforming the U.S. economy right now. The only economic problem Russia has is they have a labor shortage because their economy is running so hot that it's actually kind of hard to find people to fill all the jobs. But that's a good problem to have. A little bit of inflation, not much, actually lower than the U.S. And Elvira Nabiullina, who's the head of the Central Bank of Russia, I always say she's the only central banker in the world who actually understands her job. She raised interest rates a little bit just to cool down the inflation. They're on a complete war footing and making several million 155 millimeter artillery shells per year. Now, over to the United States, UK, Western Europe, our arsenals are depleted. We've given Ukraine, in some cases, almost everything we have. The UK is out of Storm Shadow missiles. The U.S. is out of 155 millimeter shells. Germany, France, same thing. No 155 millimeter shells left. That's why we started giving Ukraine cluster bombs. It's a form of artillery called a cluster bomb because we didn't have any more of the regular shells. We've given them, I believe, 4, maybe more, but at least 4 Patriot anti-missile batteries. The Russians have blown up 3 of them, destroyed 3 of them with their hypersonic missiles, the Patriots. So the Russian economy is fine. The Ukrainian economy scarcely exists. Russia's winning the war, but they're taking their time. They're not in a hurry. They remember the famous Ukrainian, spring, summer, fall counteroffensive. It made a few miles. It got like 2 villages, and then they were pushed back. It's a complete failure. They lost half their Bradley fighting vehicles, their Leopard Challenger tanks. Their air defenses are gone. There's nothing stopping the Russians from doing whatever they want. So that's a complete disaster. Now, so you say, well, how can you make that worse? U.S. policy has been completely misguided. Well, how can you make it worse? But leave it to the White House to come up with a way. When the war started, we and NATO allies froze Russian assets, any assets we could get our hands on. So if their central bank reserves, Russian central bank reserves were in Western banks, many of them were, those were frozen. And it's about $300 billion, mostly in U.S. Treasury securities. The entire reserve position was a little under $600 billion. Russia very intelligently put 25% of the reserves in gold. So they had about 150 metric tons of gold. They have 3,000 metric tons of gold, but it was about $150 billion of the $600 billion. So they got about 25% of the reserves in gold. We can't touch that. It's one of the attractions of gold. It's physical. It's not digital. So you just put it in a vault and keep an eye on it, but you can't freeze it in the banking system. But anyway, we have these $300 billion of U.S. Treasury securities, mostly in Europe. The amount in the United States is about 30 billion, but most of it's in Europe. It's in Deutsche Bank and Barclays and HSBC, UniCredit, UBS, and a few other banks. Now, what the United States wants to do, and we're actually passing legislation to authorize this, probably already authorized, but just to make it clear, is to seize the assets. And we've already frozen them. We've frozen them, meaning Russia can't sell them, can't collect the interest, can't transfer them, but they still belong to Russia. That's what freezing is. Now what the government wants to do is seize them, confiscate them, basically. Take them from Russia, steal them, in effect, and then use that money to rebuild Ukraine. Now, there are a number of problems with that. Number one, you're not going to be able to rebuild Ukraine because Russia will take over the whole country at the rate they're going. So there'll be nothing. Russia might want to rebuild it. The Ukrainians might, but the West is not going to rebuild Ukraine because the West is not going to be involved. That's how badly they're losing. But that aside, when you do that, that's a default on U.S. Treasury securities. But the rest of the world is going to look at that. And Saudi Arabia, Taiwan, China, South Korea, and other countries that have hundreds of billions, or in some cases, upwards of close to $1 trillion, in the case of China, of U.S. Treasury securities. They're going to say, hey, you just stole $300 billion or 50% of Russia's, the central bank of Russia's reserve position. This isn't like oligarch money or something else where you might be able to rationalize it. What if they don't like what we do? What if they don't like one of our policies? So all these countries are going to be highly motivated to get out of U.S. dollars. You can't do it all at once. This will take time. And this then, I said this is all connected. This then ties into the rise of the BRICS currency. The BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They've been around. They've been meeting since 2006. At their last meeting in August, they added 5 new members. They added 5 new members. So now it's sort of the BRICS 10. But the members they added include Saudi Arabia and Iran. So now, if you look inside the BRICS, you've got Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Russia. I believe UAE was also added, United Arab Emirates and Abu Dhabi in particular. So now you don't need OPEC anymore. You have OPEC inside the BRICS. In fact, Russia has never been a member of OPEC, but now you have Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Russia all inside the BRICS. So they have as much power, probably more, than OPEC. And they're working on a new currency. And it's all designed to basically recreate the Bretton Woods institutions. We talked about that, but they have the New Development Bank in Shanghai, which is a clone of the World Bank. They have the Conditional Asset Reserve. It's basically a clone of the IMF, swing lender for countries that are experiencing capital outflows. And they have a lot of other institutions as well, but now they're going to have their own currency. They're working on their own payments channels. So, and I've told people, the Treasury and the Fed, the Pentagon, I've had all those meetings at different times. I said, and I said this years ago, I said, you're overusing sanctions. Sanctions can work against a medium-sized country that doesn't have many alternatives, but against a major power like Russia, they don't work at all. But by overusing them, you're going to drive countries away from the dollar and undermine the role of the dollar, first as a major global payments currency and then ultimately as a reserve currency.
In this insightful conclusion, Jim Rickards provides a nuanced exploration of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, offering a detailed portrayal of Russia's strategic and deliberate military tactics. Rickards underscores the ineffectiveness of imposed financial sanctions and delivers a cautionary note against the proposed action to seize $300 billion of Russian assets, anticipating far-reaching global consequences. Amidst these geopolitical intricacies, he highlights the unexpected resilience of Russia's economy, setting the stage for a dynamic shift in the global financial landscape. The emerging prominence of the BRICS currency becomes a key focal point, emphasizing the evolving dynamics away from the traditional dominance of the US dollar. If you found the wealth of insights in today's analysis valuable, consider subscribing, liking, and sharing your perspectives in the comments section below.